Alright. My name is Aneesha Ghosh, the project lead for Stories of India, Season 1. A very warm welcome to every one of you to the fifth episode of Stories of India, titled India in Boardroom, and brought to you by www.tellmeastory.biz. It's a paperless media that works towards the popularizing of stories from academic research and social significance in collaboration with global thought leaders. Registrations are open for the writing program starting from season 4 that starting from 20th December 2021. So I would like to introduce the panelists before we proceed. First up, we have Mr. Abhijit Bhaduri. Sir, how are you?
Hi, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so he's an executive coach who works with organizations across the world on building their talent strategy. He's also a known author as well as a columnist who has more than 8 lakh followers on LinkedIn alone. Next up, we have Miss Meeta Sengupta. Hello, ma'am.
Hi, good to be here.
It's a pleasure, ma'am. She works at the cusp of policy and practice across the education and skills spectrum and enjoys sharing her gleanings via her writing for a wider audience. She has also worked as a policy observer and at the welfare of education in various roles across the countries. And the last but definitely not the least, we have SrushtiRao. Hello, ma'am.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. She is a connoisseur of practical plus creative thinking with exceptional communication skills. And she is also an emerging visual artist with several solo and group exhibitions nationally and internationally under her belt in cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Milan, Dubai, and Amsterdam, to name a few. So, without any further delay, let's start with the session. All right. So, my very first question to all of you is that what was the best and most innocent dream or goal that you had when you were fresh out of colleges and were looking forward to join the corporate? Like, how did that dream boardroom look like? So, we'll be starting with Abhijit, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, at the point of time when I finished my post graduation and started to look for work, at that point of time, jobs are not so much in abundance. In fact, at the MBA campus, you used to have the placement season spread out not over just a couple of days, but it was really spread out over 2 or 3 months. So during which time a couple of companies would come in, you would apply, and if you got selected, then you were out of placement. Otherwise, you kept trying until pretty much the companies stopped appearing or the course ran out, and then you had to look for stuff on your own. So at that point of time, it was a very different place where I got started. But I think for me, then it was really about finding a job and getting back to Delhi if I could do that, which was where I lived at that point of time. That's where my parents were, and it was really that. I don't think I had any specific choices because that was not a place where you had many choices. You just took whatever jobs were made available to you. If you happened to find something that was good, that was wonderful. But otherwise, it was not a luxury that where one would say, okay, I want to be in a FMCG or I want to be in an investment bank. I really didn't have that option. And it was really based on who selected you rather than what you selected. Now I think the equation has got flipped in many
Yeah.
ways.
Hmm.
Right. Thank you for your insight. Okay. Meeta, ma'am.
I mean, it's amazing. I realized that Abhijit Da is a college senior as well. Both of us went to the same college, if I remember correctly. Um, and both of us are, in a way, we represent that decade of change in MBAs as well. So I am not from the era where people could choose their jobs. We could not choose our jobs, but our jobs came just after liberalization in India. So for us, it was the big picture suddenly. We were being hired as CEOs, or you will be a CEO in 3 years. And that actually happened to so many of our batchmates because India was opening up to the world. and somebody who knew the new technology could go in there. So for us, it was about tasting big impact very soon and very early in our careers. And that was both good and bad, because once you've created scaled impact, it's a struggle to go back to small issues. So all of us became very greedy workers in a way. We needed to do more. We could not do with less. And so for us, the dreams were literally those naive, we will change the world dreams. Even today, when I talk to our batch, we laugh at ourselves and we say, we thought we would change the world. And then somebody will say, actually, we did. And it's not arrogant
Exactly.
at all. Because, Abhijit, you just actually said the world has changed so much. And I want to actually take this moment to thank the people who came before us, even our parents' generation, especially the women, who did so much to create this kind of change, that entry into the boardroom. So when I first went into a boardroom, for the first 5, 10 years, I would be the only woman in the boardroom. Now there are at least 3 or 4 others in every room that I enter. I'm never the only woman in the boardroom, for example. So yes, I mean the boardroom was where the room where it happened, clearly. And it still is the room where it happened. But we sort of almost felt entitled to contribute. We didn't feel entitled to own it, but we felt entitled and competent to contribute to the big changes.
Right. All right. Srishti ma'am, what's your take?
Yeah, Meeta so nicely put, that we felt entitled to contribute as opposed to feeling entitled to own it. My story is a little different because I did not pass out of MBA and get into a boardroom, but I completed my graduation in fine arts, and as a freshly
Mhm.
minted painter, I actually wanted to, burst out of creativity and change the world with perhaps the colors that I had to give. So uh, my first naive, innocent dream was to be able to contribute creatively and do something very massive in the creative world. But my first job was in filmmaking, and I my boardroom was a film city studio, which was dirty and dusty, and all I could smell was wood and paint and all of that. So that was my boardroom. But nonetheless, it was a fantastic boardroom because it was a space where I learned so much. From the grassroots level of how things are done, and literally, uh, doing things, folding the sleeves and doing the things, and then moving on to the corporate world and learning the tactics of the corporate world, which are very different from the creative world. So I think that's where when both of them met is where perhaps
Mhm.
my naive dream turned into reality, which was to make that change with my creativity. And I think I continue to uh, make an effort to do that. And yeah, the dream is coming true every time I think I step into an initiative or work.
All right. Thank you so much. Now we'll proceed to the individual questions. I'll be starting from Abhijit sir. So, like I've said, that you have been an author, and like I was skimming, through your books, and like I've come across these three of your books, like Mediocre but Arrogant, Married but Available. But two particular of those books actually caught my attention. So, one of which I'll be discussing with you, which is Don't Hire the Best, an essential guide to picking the right team. So it basically states the difference between hiring the best and hiring the right, which is actually, I think that it's very, important that we shed some light into this idea,
Right.
because we students are so much, engrossed into, pursuing the best of qualifications, getting into the best of colleges and institutions. So I think this is one of the most important that we need to discuss. So would you like to recall the experiences that got you to write this book? What was the
Yes, sure.
situation?
Sure. Thanks. When I wrote "Don't Hire the Best," I think the whole idea was that as an HR person, you're involved in hiring, And every time you hear, regardless of the role and the seniority or lack of it, people always say, we want to hire the best, whatever, marketing
Exactly.
person. We want to hire the best
Exactly.
finance person. We want to hire the best content writer. We want to hire the best whatever. And
Hmm.
yet, when you look at it, even the best of places, whichever is the company that you consider to be, the best in the world, and completely out of reach kind of thing, even those places there's attrition. People quit it. Yeah. And then the whole question that comes up is that if there are people who are the best, and then there are employers who are the best, obviously, then hopefully these people are working with each other. Why do people quit? And why are there disappointments and all of that? And that actually led me to um, interview people from many different professions. And I discovered that the first basic myth is that it's really success comes when you have your personality in the right place. Meaning, um, let's imagine that you take Sachin Tendulkar. He
Hmm.
might make a phenomenal cricketer, but might make a terrible artist. He cannot do the role that Srishti does, cannot do the role that Meeta does in terms of policy and education and all of that. So I think when you look at that, people find their niche in sort of, one large part of success comes from um, having self-awareness. So when you have that self-awareness, so for example, for me, I knew that I'm not really good at doing very numerical analysis, though I got decent marks in college. I think that was the other big realization, that everything that you can do, you don't necessarily want to do. Yeah, you may be able to get really good marks in geography or science or whatever. That does not mean you want to pursue it as a profession. So I think the whole process of building self awareness when you are taking a decision about your career actually is a hugely understated secret to success. And when I look at people who've done that well, are the ones who have done it. So that might mean that in my case, when I was joining Wipro, the whole question was I was already working as the head of HR for a company. And then when I joined as the chief learning officer, it would be a role that would report to the CHRO.
Yeah.
And so most of the times, all my classmates said, that's such a crazy decision that you are taking a step back. For me, the fact that I had done those roles and I found that I now knew really what I just exactly wanted to do, it was a great decision. I think it was the best decision that I took. And that in turn gave me the confidence to be able to, go solo and do the work that I do now on my own. So I think that awareness is a constant process. You build it on a constant basis. Having that becomes a secret of success in terms of you become happy at what you are doing. I don't think success is a great parameter because success is defined by other people. You might make $100 and somebody else makes 150, then that person is more successful. But you are more happy, which is a lesser talked about factor in career. uh, and I think those are some of the pieces. When you look at it from the employer side, that's what creates the right fit. This person is good for the role, this person wants to do the role, and this person will thrive in our culture.
Very insightful, sir. I mean, it can help so many students like us. Like, I'm so happy that I'm having this conversation with you right now. It's going to help me in my career as well. So, all right. Next up, we have Meeta ma'am. So, my question to, like, you have been an investment banker, a researcher, an editor, a teacher, and a school leader across countries and continents. So, according to you, what is the difference between skill and education? And what acts as an obstacle for the task force that is stopping India from reaching its full potential?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great question. See, education is a very holistic term. It's an umbrella term. And within education, we have a lot of learning in
Mm-hmm.
various forms and formats. And then we have schooling or the school system or a systemic way of approaching things. And within the systemic way of approaching learning, we teach four types of things. Literally, we teach only four. We teach knowledge, we teach skills, we teach attitudes, and we teach behaviors. So, skills are a subset of the systemic learning. Of course, you can acquire skills in many other ways,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore you can educate yourself in many, many other ways. But the question that you asked was about skills. So, what
Yeah.
is a skill? A skill is basically something that you learn by watching and doing and practicing. So somebody demonstrates it in front of you, you copy it, you practice it, and almost nobody gets it right in the first attempt. You have beginner's luck, of course, but you keep watching, learning, practicing, learning by doing, and you get more and more and more skilled at whatever you're doing. So that is the core answer to what is a skill. And we tend to not teach a lot of soft skills in our traditional education system, and we don't teach them simply because we are rubbish at measuring them. So that is our problem as educators, and I'm sorry, you students bear the brunt of it. We still haven't figured out how to actually measure outcomes. And really, how do you measure this amazing conversation that we are having right now? Because Srishti will say something, Abhijit will say something that's absolutely a wonderful moment. And I will learn, for example, how to pause effectively at a specific point of time. I will learn how to not move my head too much because people with low bandwidth will not be able to see it. At this moment, I will be upskilling myself in engaging with a community. It will be a learning moment and a teaching moment, and it is still a formal moment. But this is not something that we can measure. So till we find the measure for this, and I must say, corporate training is much, much better than school training in this, but even that has its limitations. Because some of these things, for example, you share a poem, you share a song, you're going to share a painting or a sketch. The impact of that will hit me maybe 7 years later. How are you going to measure at that time scale? So, skills, thankfully, you can measure and demonstrate straight away. And that is one of the biggest obstacles to the task force. That we only ask our task force to repeat things. We ask them for yes and no answers all through school. Can you do this? Yes or no? Well, it's never a yes or no. It's always an upskilling journey. Of course, I can do everything badly, and I can do few things in superlatively. So that is one. The way we are trained, for example, at school is we are skilled in taking great exams. Our biggest skill is exam taking, for example. That's actually a hurdle to how we can progress in our in the world. What else is hurting us? We do not know how to disagree respectfully. Being able to have a conversation, say, between the four of us, where we completely have different points of view, and yet we are able to progress that knowledge. That is a skill that we have not learned, where we can get fairly assertive with each other. We will still hold our own, but we will not be working to prove that we are right. This is not about our ego, it's about the knowledge that we can progress. We forgot to teach our students that the Tark Vitark is not about who's the winner. The Tark Vitark is about progressing that knowledge. So that's going to hold us back. And all of that boils down to things like critical thinking skills, the ability to analyze, the ability to communicate properly. Of course, it boils down to that. But till we recognize that learning, skilling, and education are not about us as individuals as egos and our personal progress, and it is about the content that we want to progress, the knowledge that we want to progress, we will continue to remain a little bit behind our own potential. Sorry, this was very philosophical. You asked a very practical question, but this is at the fundament of the set of issues. What we don't teach technically, of course, is very simply uh, we don't teach ourselves the process. We simply ask a child, what will you become when you grow up? Will you become a doctor, engineer, artist, painter? Whereas we should be asking the child, what are the competencies that you would love to develop as you are growing up? What are the competencies that align with your nature, as Abhijit said? Am I going to be a wonderful communicator? Am I going to become a wonderful motivator? And then you can find your path easily.
I'll just just respond to something that Meeta said. I think there's, because we are able to measure it, and she said something really brilliant, that because we are able to measure the hard skills. You can measure, do I know the tables of two? Very easy to measure. But do I speak effectively? You'll disagree with what I might think about the entire process. So I think things which you are not able to measure in those quantitative terms, we think that they are not important, and we don't teach them adequately in schools, and which is why getting into a job is done by, let's say, marks. Have you qualified as an engineer? It gets you an engineer's job. But to succeed eventually in the workplace, you are really continuously evaluated only on your soft skills. This is something nobody tells you when you're in school or college. That, how do you disagree with, how do you work with people who you can't stand socially, who are very different from you in a social, economic, political, philosophy point of view? How do you work with them? I mean, these are such powerful questions to think about. Or how do you learn something which you've never been taught, but you need to now know that, and you need to be able to teach it to five other people? Such a powerful skill. Nobody teaches you how to do that. So you are sort of left to pick it up on your own, and that's why the success factor actually varies a lot for people.
Yeah, I just like to add what Meeta and Abhijit have been saying. From an employer standpoint, we employ very fresh graduates as well, and I think the most difficult time for them is the transition from being a student to being a professional, because suddenly they're pushed into the deep end and they don't know what to do because they were not never taught how does the office culture look like, what is interacting with people, with peers, with your manager, with the whole, what is a management, what is the office structure, what do you need to do, what are soft skills as well, how to perhaps speak to someone in the corridor, and they just struggle, and I've seen people struggle and give up in those initial few weeks, a few months, and get demotivated. But I think it would be brilliant from education point of view, and I see that happening with the corporate people integrating into the classes, and telling them what the real life scenario is when they start a job. I think that prepares students for what's coming for them. And a lot of what they learn in college isn't what they would apply immediately. It is, I think, what is the fringe skill, uh, which becomes the central eventually. That's what is important.
Absolutely, ma'am. I feel it because I'm still a student. So, all right. Next up, Srushti, ma'am. So, I went through your bio, and like your credentials are endless, like starting from fine arts to marketing to entrepreneurship, social media influencer, content creation, going as far as in, Bollywood making, and to production designing and advertising. So, like, since you have had such a wide range of exposure in these different sectors, do you think that gender discrimination is still prevalent, or is there at all in the corporate world as much as it is there in the entertainment industry? Or do you think it is necessary to come up with the idea of, looking beyond gender to make corporate boardrooms diverse in India? Because in the entertainment industry, like, there are so many artists who have come up and talked about like gender discrimination, especially on screen. So it is very evident that it's there, but how much do you think that
Yeah.
it's prevalent in the corporate faculty? Or, like I said, we should come up with
Yeah.
a new idea of like looking beyond
So
gender
I
discrimination.
will, sure, sure. So I'll answer the question in two parts.
Okay.
One is the gender piece of it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Gender discrimination was there when I began my career. When I started, you're looked at in a certain way. You're naturally prejudged for your competency or the lack of it thereof when you enter an organization as a woman. They would typically uh, slot you into things you can do and typically slot you into the things you can't do. They would also perhaps make assumptions about whether you would. Since I've always been in marketing and communications, and
Mhm.
my role was demanding in terms of travel and late nights
Mhm.
and events and initiatives, uh, it was assumed that I would perhaps not travel to certain places. I would not take up certain activities, initiatives, because perhaps they're more demanding. Um, and I think in the beginning I had to fight twice as much for the same slot, the same role, and the same recognition as my male counterparts. However, I think I would also like to mention that I've been lucky enough to work under some of the most amazing women leaders that I got to work under through my career, and I learned so much. Um, and yes, there was a time when uh, the boardrooms were sexist, but not so much anymore. The times have changed, and I can speak about the last 2 decades because with my 20 years of experience, the last decade has been more accommodating, inviting, and more compassionate towards what women bring to the table. I also believe that men and women need to be able to accept each other for the differences that they get and the similarity that they get on the table. And we are two different genders, yet we have the same capability when minds are concerned to um, from the intellectual standpoint, and I think that should be welcomed. Our perspectives could be different because then there's this masculine and a feminine. Certain insights perhaps women have, men don't, men have, women don't, and we need to be able to accept those differences gracefully, and do that. In corporate India today, the boardroom unfortunately is dwindling between 15 to 20% female representation in the boardroom in companies, which is very, very low. Although from organization statistics point of view, the nationwide statistics talk about 40 to 45% women in the corporate workforce. So that's how we are. But as you go up the hierarchy, as you succeed, uh, somehow the female representation falls off. So you have lesser women on top as opposed to them being part of the larger workforce. So that has to change. And I think that would change uh, with time to come because we have a lot of uh, ground to cover as women. We started late and we're there, and I think we should accelerate. And I'm so, so positive about this generation because I believe Meeta will agree with me. For us to come out of, our conditioning of being raised, although I wasn't raised in a typically gendered household, but then you're conditioned that you're a woman and somewhere that you're a woman. So that conditioning, to come out of that and fight our way ahead, I see the young girls today, and they don't have that. I'm so glad because they don't even look at the world in a gendered form because perhaps the world has changed, households have changed, families have changed. I'm so glad to see that. So that is the gender part of it, which is changing. And I think this 15-20% in the boardroom needs to go all the way to 50%. And that's when I think we need to take out our champagne bottles and celebrate. But I'm just hoping that happens soon. The second point is diversity. Diversity today is not um, only the gender, it is not the man and woman. It is to be able to accept everyone for what they are, uh, religion, race, culture, physical ability, how what people think, what culture they come from, what socio-economic background they come from. India is still divided into regions, into the languages we speak. South Indian, North Indian. We're still divided: East Indian, Western, this, that. So when we shed off these cloaks that we have, and when we start thinking beyond that, and this diversity, when that enters the boardroom, I think that's when the true um, success would be, because then you would be adding those many perspectives uh, to the problem. What happens in a boardroom is problem solving, and the best problem solving will can be achieved when you have this wealth of knowledge and of information, of perspectives, of looking at things, and that I think would be a beautiful combination of
Combination of
minds to
minds
work
to
with.
work with.
So,
Yeah,
in
that's
simple words, we can conclude that not everyone can be a CEO, but a CEO can be anyone and from anywhere.
absolutely, absolutely.
Right. All right. So, thank you, ma'am. It was very insightful and very helpful. I think it's time that, we students come up and we talk about these things. Um, all right. So, sir, back to you. Like I said, I was skimming through your books, and now I'm coming to the next book that is very, pretty much known to the corporates. That is your Dreamers and Unicorns, right? So it is a panoramic view of the future of work and workers and workplace in order to get an organization towards its success. So, do you believe that such learning is culture and geography specific, or it differs significantly between India and other parts of the world?
I'm sorry, I missed it. I think I lost the sound for a little bit. Can you repeat the question, please, Anisha?
I think Anisha's screen is frozen for a bit. Yeah,
I
there
think
she is.
so. I know that she said something about the whole process of
Is it
learning, and
all right now?
yeah, I can hear you now. Yes, yeah. Can you repeat the question, please? Um, Anisha, can you repeat the question, please?
Of future of work and workers and workplace. I am repeating it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you repeat the question, please? Yeah, I think your screen had frozen, so I couldn't, even though
Yeah.
you perhaps repeated it. Um, um, can you type the question into the chat box, and then I can sort of respond. But
All right, I'll do it.
yeah, so I think the whole question was about the whole process of learning and careers. So I'm just going to wait for the question to come in so I can respond to you. If you put it in the private chat, then I can see the question.
Which is a great SOP as well, actually, because
Yeah. Okay. So it's do you believe that such learning as culture and geography specific, or um, it differs significantly between India and other parts of the world? So I just think that the work, um, when you are looking at the future of work, you need to look at three variables simultaneously because they're interlinked. Work, the nature of work actually determines the kind of skills that you need, and that's the workforce that you have. And the workplace is what brings these two together. So work, worker, and workplace actually always move together. So for example, if you're an artist, the workplace is the studio. It needs a certain kind of skills which are there. If you're an HR person, or you're working in the corporate world, then it's a certain kind of a workplace. So these three have to be looked at together. um, you know uh, th- we were in a scenario where these were a lot more centralized, but we are going into a place which is in the interest of speed, competitiveness, etc. You are seeing work becoming a lot more decentralized. And what that means is, instead of work happening through a hierarchy, you are actually going to have to do the work through a network of people, an ecosystem that you are able to influence, etc. So in that case, the styles of leadership are becoming far more decentralized. So the power is no longer with one person or a few set of people at the top. So I think going forward, this whole notion of the boardroom will become far less attractive, in the sense it's not going to be such a distant dream that you wait to reach that at the end of your career. But it's going to be something that empowerment and the opportunity is going to come in, um, to people in varying degrees at different stages, and the kind of work that they do. The second piece that I want to talk about is that, when you think about um, when you think about how people are learning, learning has also become decentralized. That you are learning somewhat, in the structured way in the schools and colleges, but a lot of what you actually start to learn is what you do on your own. And this is one place where India has a bit of a different style. We've always learned, through one person actually teaching. So the Guru Shishya Parampara, which is very powerful. Musicians use it, a lot of artists use it, many other people use it. You have coaches and mentors. But I think that you need to be able to have a blend where you learn the content on your own, and the model is also called the flipped classroom. So you learn the content on your own and come to the classroom to discuss and have a conversation and learn from others, and you bring in the social aspect of learning. So I think both will need to be done. Historically, it has always been very structured, but the world is becoming so unpredictable that you will need to see a lot more of unstructured learning coming up and becoming more powerful. So yes, that is how I anticipate the world is going to be different. That the importance of informal learning, stuff that you do on your own, stuff that you try out on your own, stuff that is not even part of your job description, a lot of that will create your future success stories.
Great, sir. All right. So, Meeta ma'am, the next question is for you. Um, so, like, even though the situation has changed over the years and literacy rate has increased to 77%, but still, as per UNESCO report of 2017 to 18, 35% of world's illiterate population resides in India. Learning, however, is not restricted to literacy, right? So people like learn from different life experiences and can prosper too. We see a vernacular trend emerging in India. So why is literacy or formal education still so important for the organized sector?
Ah, I think one thing we must recognize is that the organized sector is a very small proportion of total employment, entrepreneurship, and income in India. But your question specifically is about the organized sector. And they, of course, have a certain way of doing things. They have a certain process, and they have a certain proven process of doing things. And we tend to, both in the organized sector and as parents, teachers, and educators, we tend to trust only something that we have seen proof of before.
Mhm.
So this comes from a lack of trust, where we say we will only trust what we have seen before. And this is something that the younger generation will struggle with right now. Because many of us in our generation, we were given the doctor, teacher, engineer, lawyer option, and for us, it was terribly adventurous to become a management professional. I think Abhijita, for your
Yeah,
before your
absolutely.
time, who is this box wala? Are you going to do advertising? What do you actually do at work? If you are
Exactly.
in the management profession, there was a little bit before your time, but still. And the same challenge goes out to the creative profession, because we as parents find it very difficult to trust something that we have not seen before. So we have seen classic literacy, classic lexical skills being given because of the babudam years, maybe because of industrial age education, maybe whatever it is. We have seen that this particular skill set and the skill sets for which we get marks and certificates have great economic value. And we are still a very insecure people. So we have two traits that hold us back: our own insecurity. Will we be able to make it? Will our children be able to make it if they leap forward into adventures that do not have any proof? And we have very little faith and trust in new skills. So we do not have faith, for example, in competencies that for which we don't have a certificate. Nor are we given that kind of trust by the people who hired us to hire people. So if we are in the business of hiring people, if I hire somebody because I look at them and I say, look at that raw talent right there. If something, what if something goes wrong? Our risk aversion comes into play as well. If something goes wrong, how did you hire that person? That person didn't have the right certificate. Here was another candidate who had this beautiful certificate, and that certificate was predicated upon lexical skills, was predicated upon skills of exam taking, was predicated upon skills of replicating photocopier like answers in the exam. We are just such conventional people until we learn to become 10% braver every day, for example, or to make at least some risky decisions, because and that's on us decision makers right now, that at least 5 to 10% of our decisions right now have to be slightly risky, because you students can't do it all by yourselves. Going out and proving how wonderful you are, of course you're going to do your very best, but till we support you in that journey and say, listen, beyond certificates lies our faith in ourselves as selectors, lies our trust in ourselves where we can back up our own decision making, and our ability to say, of the 10 people hired, one or two were unconventional. And we'll train them, we'll take care of them, we'll grow them up into the pipeline. I think that there is a leap of faith that we also need to make. And from on your point of view, I mean, I totally accept again, you talk about lexical words. As communicators, Srishti, you are definitely somebody who communicates way beyond language. Abhijit Da is one of the most wonderful artists I know. I mean, with his sketches, etc., he doesn't need language. Look at the way people and a lot of employees outside the organized sector communicate with each other, even though they're not literate. Emojis will do the job. How does somebody who's not literate manage an address book on their phone? They have different symbols for people. You have phone. The world today is a post lexical world, which gives us decision makers even more responsibility to recognize this change and say, we have to be able to build a more trusting system. We need trust from those who hire us, our shareholders. We need to trust our own competence, and we need to be able to trust these youngsters who will build their competencies.
And there are new actually opportunities coming up. And for example, somebody says that I want to be a YouTube creator. You can earn a living, but you have to be really good at that. So I think what has not changed is that you need to be really good at the top of the profession, regardless of what you do, whether it's a conventional track, whether you want to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer. That remains the best actually, in any profession. The top 1% or 2% are very different from everybody else. So I think that remains, even in a conventional career or in an unconventional career, regardless.
Right. So, you mean like there are so many people who actually stated this particular statement that I quote, that there is no place for mediocrity.
Yeah, I mean,
That's such a
mediocre,
big and good question, Abhijita, MBA.
mediocre but arrogant. Uh, so I think it depends. I mean, the we always, when we compare, when we look at role models, we always look at and get inspired by the top of the profession. So when you look at any sport, or you look at films, when you look at anything, artists, uh, corporate leaders, we are always inspired by those who are at the top. When do you see somebody benchmarking an average or below average person and saying, I want to be really like that? You never see that, right? And the opportunities today are becoming a lot more skewed. So unless you are in a job where, regardless of what you do, you kind of keep going at the same pace and grow in that, and there are some professions where it is still possible to do that, but those numbers are reducing a lot. In most of the places where you want to stand out from the crowd and be recognized for what you are, then it's that much. You want to be that much ahead of everybody else, then you got to be that much better than everybody else. So I think it's a very straightforward equation. And I think the term, talent is sort of really misunderstood in many ways. I think when you look at people who are at the top of the profession, whichever profession, especially in the fine arts, I think there's a great example of that. I mean, the best of the writers, the best of the actors, the best of the singers, they're the ones who practice every single day. I mean, I think there's a quote from some sportsman, I forget, which is when the person says that, I think it's Nadia Comaneci or someone, who said that, talent is not that you can do that vault and get into perfection. Talent is on the day when you have slept late, when it's raining outside, and it is cold, and it is like really just not the day, and you are justified. Nobody will say, why did you not practice today? The day you get up and do that, you do your 12 hours of practice every single day, that is talent. Or you write every single day, that is talent. You draw every single day, that is talent. You sing and practice every single day, you do your sargam, that is talent. It is not that the guy who can do it spontaneously. I mean, I think growing up I had at least a very lopsided view of what talent was, and over time I have learned that it is not what you can do naturally, it's what you shape and craft and chisel every single day. So your raw talent only leaves you mediocre. It is this whole business of busting your guts every single day and working at it, that is what is talent.
I couldn't agree more, Abhijit. I mean, golden words.
As a teacher, I just want to put in a teacher perspective, especially at the school level. One of the biggest mistakes we make is to highlight the top of the class as somebody who should inspire. Whereas the biggest gain for us as teachers, and we should be tested on that only as teachers, is
Mm.
how much the mediocre were able to add value to themselves towards their potential. The bottom of the class and the middle of the class, and how much they were able to progress. That's the learning journey. Everyone has a different kind of talent, like he said, but it's the mediocre and their progress. That's the beautiful journey.
Yeah.
Absolutely, ma'am. All right. Okay. So, Srishti, ma'am, uh, like I was going through your blogs in itemom.com, and then I came across this particular line that you have written. I'm a year wiser, wounded and healed, cautious of certain people. Thank you 2018 for being a lesson. So now that you are wiser and you have healed, so like there are still these certain people present, right? And they don't only create an impact in someone's personal life, but it also impacts their professional life as well. So now standing here in 2021, so what is your take on the situation where because of these certain people, talents are unable to rise up to the surface, which is not only affecting the reputation of the corporate world but also India as a country?
Sure, sure. Again, there's a little bit of context to that blog. I've always been the kind of professional who's put her head down and just done the work that I love to do. And then just that. I mean, my work has been what I have really ever cared for. But over the years, I realized, and which I think Abhijit and Meeta were also talking about earlier, that you're not taught about these things, about how to
Ma'am, I'm
perhaps,
sorry to interrupt. Just a minute. I think Abhijit sir
Yeah, I
did
have.
write something.
yeah,
I'm
No,
sorry I missed it. Yeah, sir.
so I
He
just
needs to
have,
leave.
I just have to excuse myself. I have, another place to get a call. So if I can just excuse, thank you so much, so very much for having me, and I'll be in touch with all of you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, sir, for being here. It has been a great pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Srishti, so sorry you were saying something, and
no problem.
please, thank you. Lovely. Bye, Meeta. Bye, Srishti. Bye, Anisha. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Again, I'm sorry, ma'am, for interrupting. It's
Yeah,
just I saw the
no
text
problem.
right.
I lost the trail of thoughts that I was on. But I believe I was answering your question. And as people are not taught how to interact with people, or the kind of people
Mhm.
that there are
Mhm.
in organizations, and specifically if that doesn't come naturally to you, um,
Mhm.
then it becomes a little difficult in the corporate space to uh, survive after a certain point. And I will not mince my words here. The higher you grow in an organization, the more you start getting introduced to what is commonly known as the office politics. And this is a touchy subject. A lot of corporate professionals would want to absolutely deny the existence of office politics. But um, if uh, we want to be honest, then there is. And when I say corporate politics, it's not about cutting each other's throat or backstabbing or so on and so forth, in those literal words. That can be a part of this behavior, but at the end of it, space on top is not as much. So if you want to fit in there, it's a dog eat dog world there. And that kind of competitiveness happens. And if people are not confident about their other competence or skills or the kind of deliverables that they could give, perhaps they resort to other things. And I think it took me a while to get to understand that that happens. And I had to experience a certain toxicity to be able to, get woken up that, dude, this happens. It's not just about you putting your head down in your work, doing your work, and going home. Like, it does not literally work like that. So it is also about a lot about relationship building, and I'm talking about it from a positive point of view. It is not just about doing your job. It is, one is, I think I totally believe that you should be extremely good at what you do, if you are aiming to be part of the boardroom or in the C suite and so on and so forth. But you also have to be extremely good in anticipating people, in anticipating people's behaviors, in anticipating people's moves. And then perhaps you got to be you got to protect yourself and your sanity while you work. And I have experienced, without, I mean, naming, I have experienced toxic work cultures. And I think those are the worst to be a part of. And it's very demotivating, and it kind of breaks uh, people who have not experienced this before. And at least I, during that particular experience, was pushed into the deep end with, nowhere. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a float. And I was like, I had to learn on my own what toxic cultures are, how you got to put your foot down, and how you got to preserve yourself by either fighting against it if you can, or removing yourself from a certain situation. So I think that kind of mindset is something you got to develop, resilient, and you got to be able to think on the spot about handling people or managing people for that point, uh, for that matter, I think. And Meeta is nodding, and I
I,
think you have something to add.
no, it's amazing. It's
That's okay.
amazing. One doesn't realize that toxicity is, in a way, part of the game. And there are people like me who say, I don't want to deal with your rubbish. And I will
Hmm.
chart my own path, and I will find a way to engage, consistently engage, but I do not want to play your games. So you have a choice
Absolutely.
over there saying either you join the game playing and you play the same game that they're playing, but you play it better than them. So not only does your work
Mm.
have to be good, you have to actually recognize what is the game that is being played over here. And that's literally that is taught in training sessions, by the way. These are the games people play was a book in the 1970s,
Yeah.
in corporate world, when psychology and management come together. And then you have to outplay people's game. So what did Michelle Obama say? We take the high road. So that's one tactic for playing the game or outplaying the others at their game. So either you decide, as you said, you withdraw from that situation, which means you say, I'm not playing your games. Or you say, I'm going to play this game and I am so going to beat you at this game. The thing is, it doesn't have, you don't have to retain the toxicity in the way you play your game. You're playing to win. And each time you play a game that is bigger than only your own personal win, you've already brought in the relationships and helped them to the win as well. So the bigger game
Yeah.
almost always wins. And in a way, the successful person here is the turnaround artist, where you said, this is a rubbish situation. And then this person, sometimes sometimes in one sentence, sometimes over 10 years, is able to turn the situation away from toxicity and towards progress. And that's hard work. I mean,
It's
you're
hard work.
talking, yeah, and that's within the corporate setup. Now, within the board setup, the board actually comes together only 3 to 4 times a year. And there is nothing more brutal than a board that disagrees with each other. That is
Mm.
literally a jungle fight. It's because they're there only to prove how smart they are in a way, or to feel good about themselves in a way. At one level,
And the
that's
stakes are higher, perhaps,
exactly,
Meeta.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that jungle fight is brutal, and then you sort of you have to turn around and say, if you can't handle the heat, then don't get into the fire. Then you just have to play the game also. And again, Srushti so well said that you have to trust yourself, you have to be very good, and it is about your core competence. Hold your own. You could play ice to their fire and it'll still work. ठीक है तो है यार. And resilience is the name of the game. डरना नहीं है. Many of us, again, because of our previous conditioning, especially as women, and as, we were taught to sort of withdraw and let the man have the last word. We laugh, we joke, we smile. We let them say, okay, I said this, but you can take the point from us. That's fine, as long as our
Yeah.
point is taken. There's a journey ahead for all of us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's actually
I
not
think,
bad.
yeah, if your intent is right and your heart is in the right place, whatever you choose to do, whether, as Meeta said, play their game, or like me, I don't want to play your game, but I'm here and I know your moves, but I'm not playing them. If you're in that position, then even that works. So what suits you, what works for you, is what you got to do, because at the end of it, you don't want to feel, can I use the word shitty about yourself? At the end of it, you want to feel good about what you're doing. You got to feel confident in what you're achieving at the end of it, and you got to be able to sleep well at night. So that's all it is about. And whatever suits you is, you want to play dirty. You want to play clean, but be sure about what you want to do and how you want to do it.
We've scared the young ones, Srushti.
No, actually, it's, like we have heard so many successful stories and their journey and everything, but there are so rare cases that they actually talk about it, like, frankly,
Yeah.
and let us know that this is going to be the situation that you'll be facing. So you should take proper precautions, as in you should
Yeah.
build up your personality in such a way. So it's actually kind of very helpful for me, and I'm sure the students who are going to see this session, it's going to be very, very helpful for them as well.
So
So
the
yes, I
higher
am a
you
big,
go,
yeah,
yeah, the higher you go, the more intense it becomes. It could not be so
absolutely.
prevalent at entry level, because everybody is like trying to understand where they are, and
Hmm.
also what you deliver in terms of your competency is very base level. The higher
Hmm.
you go, the more you would be recognized for the intellectual fuel that you get to the organization, and perhaps there, and the collaboration and the relationships and the strategic inputs, and that's when the game begins. So the
Yeah, the
arena is set
turnaround.
later on.
Yeah, the turnaround artistry. And I want to emphasize something Srushti said, and that's what you're paid for, that you can handle the intensity of it, the non-stop
Right.
tight intensity. And it's that wo chabi bharti jati hai, you keep filling it and gets tighter and tighter. Everybody works hard. The most junior person will work 10, 15, 18 hours a day. The most senior person will work the same hours. It's hard work all the time. But how many hits can you take per minute? And how many hits can you bat away per minute? That gets harder and harder and harder. And that's what you're paid for.
Right. Absolutely.
The closer you're to the center of power, the more the intensity increases. And that's how you need to understand your career path also. And it gives you enough time to prepare yourself uh, for what's in store. So just make sure that you recognize when it's coming.
Right. I will try to. So, now it's a common question for the both of you. Like, let's address the COVID situation. So, this the pandemic has affected the corporate world in India as much as it has impacted every other horizon. So, how do you think the boardroom decisions have become more intelligent, inclusive, and innovative with this disruption? So, Meeta ma'am, go ahead.
I was surprised and very pleasantly surprised to see everybody actually become kinder and more. I did not expect to see that. I expected a lot of self preservation to be key, but I don't know whether it was just, no, it wasn't just the words they said, but a lot of the decisions that were taken were ultimately about having a slightly kinder approach, slightly slower approach, definitely a more flexible approach to what you can enable in the organizations that you are supporting and leading. That did not make them less needy or greedy or to be profitable or to be efficient. You still had to be, you have to get that right. You have to keep the rigor.
Mhm.
There's no slack on that. But there are certain ways of making it easier for the people around you. And there's a part of me that said, you should have been doing this all the time anyway. That level of empathy for the people who work should be part of our mental makeup anyway. So why did it take, or the flexibility that you are allowing people to work from home or at office, or it's okay for the pressure cooker whistle to come in the middle of the meeting? Or to not be so combative in every one of your meetings, saying it's okay if your kid or your cat came and sat in your lap. Life is a part of work. You can't have the schizophrenic differentiation between work where you're such a mad person and home where you're such perfect flower. That sort of schizophrenia that is expected of us is just unreal. And I think boardrooms have learned to recognize this in the pandemic. And I hope we continue to learn these lessons going forward, even as we are still solid organizations with very clear goals.
Right. Srishti ma'am.
Yeah, I think totally agree with what Meeta said. And the pandemic humanized all of us, including the CEO who was the superstar running the show. We all entered their homes. We entered each other's homes. Uh, the larger teams entered their managers' homes, and they saw their kids running around while they're perhaps giving you the lowdown on how your day is going to be on or on your tasks. Uh, so we developed a lot of empathy towards each other, which was there, but perhaps we restrained from exhibiting it. But right in during the pandemic situation, we have cried during meetings because we have lost people, and we know we are all in it together, and no one is perhaps bigger or greater than the other. These are just titles that we hold, but at the end of it, we are all humans, and we can succumb to the same thing. And we are in it together. And today, COVID can happen to one, it can happen to the other, and can affect equally. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that humanized the whole corporate world, and it made them empathetic towards each other. And I think that's where the solutions then came from, and that's when people became kinder towards each other, and said started even looking at mental health. and that is so important. I think started recognizing mental health, started giving time off for mental health, and said, "Do you want to talk?" Because this wasn't something that was happening before, and managers started asking their team members, "Do you want to talk today? Are you okay today? Did you sleep well? Did you eat well?" And stuff like that. And I do hope that we continue to do this and we don't go back to being robots at work. And I hope we just get this positive feeling of being in it together, and then continue being humans together even after all of this is over.
Absolutely. Even I agree with what you said about mental health. It's so important and people ignore it. And actually, I won't say ignore it, but misunderstanding mental health. Like there are still, people like for example, if a child comes out and says that, "Mama, I'm feeling very depressed," and then she goes on saying, "Oh, you're just 15 and 14, you're feeling depressed, what are you going to do when you become 40 and all?" I mean,
Yeah.
they don't understand what mental health is. So it's really important, and I think that
Yeah.
the way you said it, it's very evident that we have started acknowledging these issues, these important issues, as well as a wake up call to the humanity as well. So it's great to know that. All right, so before we end, we must ask all of you to about how the corporate world is helping its peons and pantry boys and class 4 staff, given that their relevance has decreased from the work from home practice. So would you like to share the stories which you have influenced or witnessed?
So I tend to work a little bit as I work on boards, etc., and a little bit outside core organizations. So not too many direct stories, but I do know that when these discussions came up for advice and definitely for funding, so do we have permission to make sure that this goes through? It was unanimous that the class 4 employees, the peons, etc., A, should not suffer at all economically. I mean, it's obvious the people who have the least deserve the most support, because they have not only because they have supported us, but because we are humans. And the other thing that happened was again communication. Beautifully said, Srushti, we were all humans in it with the same illnesses. So whether it was a PN who fell ill or it was somebody else who fell ill, we checked in on everybody. We made sure that there was food going to their houses, there was a tiffin service available to everybody, regardless of what the level was. We are in it together. This is a crisis, and our crisis response has to be as humans, not as boxes in an organization chart. I think we realize that our boundary conditions do not apply when it comes to our human to human connect with each other. And as families, as even as corporate families, we are all the same family.
Right. Ma'am.
Similarly, in my circle, in my organization, and larger circle where I know of the companies that my friends work with, I think all of these employees were taken care of. They were all retained, and their salaries at least reached them on time. I also know of domestic helpers which were taken care of throughout the pandemic. So, they were paid. People made sure that their expenses are taken care of, their hospital medical expenses are taken care of if there is a need. People also pushed for getting beds, oxygen, and all of that, especially for these team members who needed that support because they don't have the connections, they don't have the relationships to make this possible. And I've seen people, given so much of time, effort, and energy in making sure that they were well taken care of. I think, again, the kindness, the empathy that the pandemic has uh, made us relearn. I think that's so important. In the time of crisis, everyone came together, and I think that's just so beautiful. Um, and That's that.
Let's just hope that this continues, especially that now I'm entering the corporate world.
Let's just hope that we never have that kind of a crisis ever again.
No, no,
Anyway,
definitely not. But the personality stays, the attitude. Right. So with this, we have come to end of the session. Thank you very much for this insightful conversation and for the time that I know that you are so very busy people and still you have made time to come up here and talk about such important aspects. Not only is this concerned with the corporate life, but also to an extent with personal life as well. Personality development and everything. So I truly enjoyed the panel discussion, and with this, we end the fifth episode titled "India in Boardroom" under the Stories of India, brought to you by www.tellmeastory.biz. Registrations are open for the writing program season 4, the last date of registration being 20th of December 2021. The next episode of Stories of India season 1 will have Rahul Ravel, Sumant Batra, and Bharati Pradhan speaking on India in the time of Raj Kapoor, Sanjeev Kumar, and Shatrughan Sinha. Till then, stay safe, stay well, and stay together, although distance. So, thank you so much, and good night.
thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.